Hey guys, so there was a discussion recently in the GAA group about tracing either your direct line or adding on all these different cousins and aunts and uncles and third cousin 4 times removed and how far ever you're going to go. And the discussion was what's the point of adding all those other people? Why don't you just stay on your direct line of your tree? Well, I'm going to explain why it is very important to make sure that you actually expand to add aunts and uncles and cousins in this episode called Go Wide! Now, I know a lot of people, they have their own ways of doing their own trees, and that's fine. I'm not here to tell you what is the right way or the wrong way of doing your tree. I'm just going to explain from my own personal experience of why I think it is very important that you actually add in those extra cousins and aunts and uncles and tracing pretty wide. I was actually discussing this with Sue, our queen bee and creator of GAA. All hail the queen. And we were discussing, we had the same, feelings about this, about going wide and how important it is. And I know a lot of people have their own individual stories. So if you have your own individual story about why it's important to go wide and the results that has happened because of that, put it in the comments below so you can share with other people of why this is important and how beneficial it is to your research. Okay, so let's move on to my personal experiences. My first one is part of my brick wall, who is still technically my brick wall, but I've gotten farther with doing the research I have by going wide. It is my third great grandma, Grandma Maggie Helfrich. And I have not been able to trace her past her since I started doing genealogy research. I have this little date book that has had some of the basic information about her in it, about her birth, her marriages, the children that she had. So I was able to have that. But I didn't have any sources to back any of this information up. One of my biggest problems was I was unable to connect her with the Helfrich family. Her second husband was Jacob Helfrich, and I could not find anything about him or how he's related to some of the Helfrichs in St. Louis, because she came from Tennessee. How did she meet him? I was just a mess trying to figure this out. Well, fast forward a little while, and I'm tracing some of her descendants a little bit, and her granddaughter, who is my great-grandma, her name was Maggie as well, Maggie Buer. She married Joseph Ilg. I found her marriage record, and I was looking through it, and one of the witnesses on there was an Emil Helfrich. That's the first document that I've seen with the name Helfrich that is directly connected with my family. So I took him and started tracing him to see if there's any way that I could get in a roundabout way to get to the Helfrich family in St. Louis. Now, this record was in Detroit, Michigan, so it's kind of a stretch, but at the same time, it's too much of a coincidence for me to not trace it. Turns out he was originally from St. Louis. I found his parents. Then once I found his parents, I traced his father and his family. I looked through census records. I looked through city directories to see how closely related they were and how far they lived from each other. And would you know, I found a Jacob Helfrich that was related with that particular Helfrich family in St. Louis. So while I don't have that perfect connection to that Jacob Helfrich and that family, that right there is going to be the closest I think I'm ever going to get to it. But that's pretty good. I mean, there's too many coincidences there for it to say definitely not. But again, it's not perfect. But if I wouldn't have started researching wide into the Helfrich family and brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and cousins, I would not have been able to make that connection, at least to bring it around to the Helfrich family. That's just one example. Let me give you a second example. On my husband's side of the family, he has the Hilke family. That is his grandma's maiden name. And I was able to trace them back just a couple of generations until I found the one that came over from Germany. Well, I could not find anything else out about him or any of his other family, but I knew that there were other Hilkes in St. Louis. I'd seen them in city directories and census records, and even to the point where some people were connecting my Hilke family with other Hilke parents that they weren't supposed to be connected with. It wasn't the same people. I had to disprove any of that. But then I thought, what if they are actually related back a generation? Not the generations that they were connecting, but what if, they were actually related from Germany? So I decided to research all of the Hilkes that I came across to see if I could make some connections any way, shape, or form, and then trace it down and basically put all the Hilkes together with who they belong to. And by doing that, I was able to find naturalization records. I was able to find passport applications. I was finding passenger lists from when they came over. And I've actually written a blog about this. It'll go into more detail about how I made this connection. But by going wide and researching the brothers and sisters of the Hilke family that I had, I was able to determine these are all related. They're all related. That my husband's, it's his second great-grandfather is related to all these other Hilkes that I was finding. They had 4 brothers, 1 sister, I think it is. I'm going from memory right now. But again, if I would not have researched wide, I would not have been able to find them. And I also found in a book a story about one of the Hilkes that actually listed all of the brothers and sisters and the parents and where they came from and all kinds of details. If I would not have researched him, who's not in my direct line, I would not have found out more information about our particular line. So these are just 2 examples that I have. I have more examples. And like I said, I know you do too. So please put them in the comments. Tell us your stories, why it is important to go wide, and what discoveries you have made. So don't limit yourself to just your direct line, because you may be holding yourself up from making those discoveries and tracing your lines back and finding out more information and more stories about your family. And that's the whole point, is we are to take as many records as we can to paint a full picture of our ancestors. So that's my 2 cents, everyone. You guys have fun tracing your family tree. Bye.